I mean, the thing that I'm inspired by you is you have this sense of, you know, this meditation you've learned, strategies, neuroscience you're a fan of, you're a researcher of the mind. But a lot of people know you as just this successful actress, right? Um, what made you really fascinated about understanding about the mind, neuroscience,
I had a very
meditation?
serious anxiety problem, and it was a panic attacks. And I got that when I was dancing, and I was happy. I was a dancer. That's what I did, and I loved it. And I was in LA. I was so excited, and I just come back from dancing in Vegas, and went to an audition, and that audition actually, I got the job. I was like, oh my God, I was so excited. And my mom, I called my mom and dad. I said, "Oh my God, I'm going to be on a Tennis Journey Ford show." And the choreographer was like so excited. He said, "I'm always going to use you." And always, and I was so happy. There was an agent that came up and he said to me, I'm just basically covering the show at William Morris. He said, "But do you have an agent?" And I said, "No, I don't." And he said, "Well, here, come and see me Wednesday after the show is over," because it was going to be filmed. We were rehearsing. I didn't pay any mind to it because I just come from New York. Believe me, I got as much Me Too issues as anybody could
Wow.
imagine. And I thought, no, 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 you're not going to, I get it. So they called me at my apartment in Hollywood and said, "Miss Hawn, blah, blah, blah. Yes. Oh, we're waiting for you." And I said, "Oh my God, you mean this is real?" Yeah. So I got in my car. I drove to William Morris and I sat there while they talked about me and around me. And I'm watching back and forth like, oh, oh, oh. And they said, "Well, if you want to sign her, you can." And this was a young agent. He was a junior agent. And they signed me. And about a week later, I went up for this job, Desilu Studios back in the day. And I got this job. And I went, "Well, wait a minute." I said to this agent, my new agent, "I couldn't have gotten the job. They said that I was too young for that part." He said, "No, no, they wrote in a part for you,
Wow. A different part.
a different part." And so that's what happened. And what happened is I then became anxious around it because I thought, first of all, I was going to eventually go home and open a dancing school and get married and be happy. And these were things I saw my life doing. Well, you can't always plan your life. In fact, you never can, as long as you stay open for the possibilities. So my point is that I then became anxious and then I started having panic attacks. I did not feel comfortable. I didn't want to go to Hollywood. I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to be a star, certainly. And when I was 11 years old, people said to me if I wanted to be a dancer or a star or do on Broadway. And I said, no, I just want to be happy. And I was 11. And I remember this and I thought, oh, they look surprised.
Mm.
Interesting. But happiness is something I've always kept primo in my mind. Premier happiness. That any unhappiness that I was experiencing, I'll either learn for it or walk away from it. And so that's what happened. I wasn't going to be dancing anymore. I wasn't going to be a dancer anymore. My life had changed, is what happened. And so I went to a doctor, in answer to your question, long-winded answer. And I went to a psychologist and I worked with him for 8 years.
Wow, really? How old were you when you started?
21.
Okay.
And I went to him. It took me a year to start, to work through. But it was the most fascinating experience because once again, if you're watching yourself try to get better, smarter, healthier, however, then your mind can become just a treasure trove of possibilities. It's incredible. So, oddly enough, I did the Freudian way back then, and that had some brilliance to it because he created something when you said free associate, you'd have to lie down on the bed, on the what they have, the small sort of reclining chair, whatever. And you had to think of, whatever comes to your mind, whatever, doesn't matter what. Could be chewing gum, could be, one time I had an old Corvette and it was given to me for a parade or something. And it really looked like a penis. I mean, it was this long with the thing and whatever. And I drove it around. And one of my things I remember saying when I laid down in free associated is I said, I feel like in my car, I feel like I'm driving a penis. So that was the first thing that came to my head, right? But you have to be honest and say what's coming into your head, right? You got to be clear. It could be some terrible stuff. That wasn't so terrible, but it was the idea that I had, which I thought was kind of odd. So, when you go through the examination of your own mind without, with freely, without censoring, this is really important to be able to grow from these various things. What happens is that you think you're feeling fine. You go in there and you start either free associating or talking. And the next thing you know is you're either crying because something happened. There's all kinds of veils that get lifted from your eyes and from your vision. And that's what's so beautiful. And then it's like a window gets open in your brain and suddenly that fear of whatever isn't there anymore. So that was my interest and I continued that, right? So I was just learning and learning and learning at that point. I called it the University of Me. And
For 8 years, right?
yeah. And then inside of that 1972, I started meditating.
Really? Wow. Before it was big.
Well, it was the Beatles then. It was like Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and he was the guy that did TM, Transcendental Meditation.
Yep.
And I was initiated to that. Very simple. You get a mantra and so forth. And I will tell you.
You can't share your mantra, right?
No, you're not supposed to share your mantra. But I can't even explain it because it was so visceral. But it was the first time I sat down and I really focused on the quiet, the breath, the smell, the scent of the incense, the wind from the window that was moving the curtains. And I sat there and it was the most extraordinary experience for me to get out of my head and into my heart.
Wow.
And I just could feel my heart beating. I was so happy. I kind of met myself again because I am a happy person by nature. And all of the struggles and all those things, it just unlocked my true joy. And even today, all time when I meditate, my heart gets so full that I actually have a tear or two that comes down because it's just such a beautiful feeling. The feeling of nothing, feeling of nothingness. And yet you're in the middle of nothingness. And yet that's when you're flourishing. I can't explain it, but it was beautiful. So that's when I started meditating. And then I started learning about the brain.
Wow. So you've been meditating for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.